Nights in Noxus were never silent. You couldn't cram so many thousands of people from all across the Empire into one place and expect quiet. Desert marching songs from the Zagaya Enclave drifted from their tented pavilions by the water, and the martial clashing of blades echoed from a nearby reckoner's arena. Drakehounds quarreled in an iron-walled enclosure howled as they caught the scent of slaughtered livestock from the northern kill yards. The cries of widowed spouses, grief-stricken mothers, or nightmare-racked veterans were a nightly chorus to accompany the roars of drunken soldiers and the promises of street hawkers who plied their trade best in the darkness. No, the nights in Noxus were never silent, except here. This part of Noxus was deathly quiet. Mora held her pack of brushes, paints, and charcoals close to her chest as she felt the din of the Noxian night fade. The lack of sound was so sudden, so shocking, that she stopped in the middle of the street, never normally a good idea, and looked around. The street was in an older, wealthier district of Noxus, known as Mortora, or Iron Gate, but was otherwise unremarkable. The light of a full moon reflected from its paving of irregular cobbles like scores of watching eyes, and the buildings to either side were well built with stone blocks that spoke of an experienced hand, perhaps that of a war mason. Mora saw a tall shrine at the end of a side street, where 3 armored figures knelt before the obsidian wolf within its pillared vault. They looked up in unison, and Mora hurried on, knowing it was unwise to attract the notice of men who prayed in the dark with swords. She shouldn't be out here in the dark. Tavo had warned her not to go, but she'd seen the serpent in his eyes, and knew it wasn't fear for her safety that moved him, but envy. He had always believed himself to be the best painter in the little circle. That she had been selected for this commission instead of him cut deep when the crisply folded and elegantly written letter had arrived at the shared studio. Cerise and Conrad had been elated, begging her to remember everything she could, while Zerka simply told her to be sure her brushes were clean. "Do you think you'll get to speak to him?" Cerise had asked, as Mora opened the door to hear the drifting echoes of the night bell fading over the harbor. The idea of venturing out into the darkness filled Mora with equal parts dread and excitement. "He's sitting for a portrait, so I suppose I shall have to," she'd answered, pointing to the darkened sky. "We'll need to discuss what manner of painting he wants, especially since I won't have natural light." "Strange that he wants his portrait done at night, eh?" said Conrad, wide awake and wearing his blanket like a cloak. "I wonder what he sounds like," added Cerise. "Just like everyone else," snapped Tavo, rolling over and wadding his threadbare pillow. "He's not a god, you know. He's just a man. Now will you all just shut up? I'm trying to sleep." Cerise ran over and kissed her. "Good luck," she giggled. "Come back and tell us everything, no matter how sordid." Mora's smile had faltered, but she nodded. "I will, I promise." The directions to her new patron's mansion were exceptionally specific, not simply in her eventual destination, but in the precise route she must take to get there. Mora knew the geography of the capital well, having walked its streets for days when hunger gnawed her belly, or when they couldn't pool enough commission money and the owner of their studio kicked them out until they'd earned enough to pay what was owed. This part of town, though, was a growing mystery to her. She'd known the mansion was here, of course. Everyone in Noxus knew where he lived, though few could recall ever going there. With every step she took, Mora felt like she'd wandered into a strange city in a newly conquered land. The streets felt unfamiliar, narrower and more threatening, as if each twist and turn brought the walls closer and closer until they would eventually crush her. She hurried on through the unnerving quiet, craving a source of fresh light. A boundary lantern, perhaps, or a low-burning candle in an upper window set to guide a night-calling suitor. But there was no illumination beyond that of the moon. Her heartbeat and pace quickened as she heard what could be a soft footfall behind her, or the sigh of an expectant breath. Turning a sharp corner, Mora found herself in a circular plaza with a fountain gurgling at its center. In a city as cramped as this, where people lived cheek by jowl and space was at a premium, such extravagance was almost unheard of. She circled the fountain pool, its water silver in the moonlight, admiring the sculpted realism of its carved centerpiece. Hammered from crude iron, it represented a headless warrior encased in a thick warplate and bearing a spiked mace. Water spilled from the neck of the statue, and Mora felt a chill as she realized who it was intended to represent. She hurried past the fountain towards a double gate of seasoned silverbark set in a black wall of red-veined marble. As the letter had promised, it stood ajar, and Mora eased herself between its heavy leaves.